Anybody familiar with the term viscosity? Anybody know how a car runs? Pistons.
Oil.
Oil. Yes. Yeah, do you want slow, cold oil, or do you want hot, thin oil? Hot and thin. All right? So the same thing works in the muscle cell. You want the fluids to be very thin and hot, so they can actually contract, and you have less friction, so they can relax faster. So you're improving viscosity, you're improving heart rate, which is related to catecholamine response. So you're kind of amped up, nervous system's ready to fight. There's a lot of things going on. You're able to hit positions. So you're talking to your muscle spindles, your Golgi tendon organs. Then you follow it up with a specific warm-up, and the term that is used in overkill is dynamic. And this is just stuff that's actually specific to the movement patterns that you're going to take into your sport. I look at it more or less, what's going to potentiate my practice? What are some things that I can really get the nervous system firing? So those are things like your basic mock drills. So Gerard Mock came up with the A skips, the B skips, the C skips, this sprint technique. I think they're good for all athletes. Straight leg bounds, hamstring kicks, etc. Just things that are quick, have a rhythm to it. The next thing that should be developed, and you prioritize this based on what engages the nervous system the most, and that would be elastic strength development. So that would be jumps, med ball throws, hops, etc. But the caveat to that is, if it's eccentrically based, it needs to go at the very end of the program. So eccentrically based means that I'm actually having to catch my body weight or something added to body weight, so I'm actually doing depth lands maybe, or successive hops over hurdles. And that's where I'm actually having to catch myself and then go. So that's going to tear the muscle up, eccentric training, and it's actually going to fry my nervous system. So I would maybe want to put that at the end of my sprint training or my tactical training before I go in the weight room. After jump or throw training, the next thing that would follow is speed development. So the faster movements are always first. So that would be your velocity work followed by speed endurance work. So your velocity work on the track or speed development for any athlete, for instance, fast stuff first, slow stuff that may be questionable to call metabolic training needs to happen next. Then your weight training. So if you ever have to sacrifice on something, let's say the athlete only has 3 hours to practice, do what's going to impact their performance in competition first. That means if you're a track athlete, sprint. Give the energy to the sport. Don't ever sacrifice the sport to do other things. So always think of that too. Now, I cannot take credit for the chicken soup analogy. That's a Charlie Francis thing. He always called tempo, it was the chicken soup. And I agree. As a former athlete, I always felt like what you said. The day after, if I did something of low intensity or restorative, I felt better the next day. And that's what new research as of 2011 is finding. Thank God. There is a lot of research being done in rugby and in football or soccer showing that athletes, when they finish a competition, instead of going to practice the next day and doing high-intensity sprinting or like mock practice again, like a short field or whatever they call it, short-sided field, if they actually do something of low skill, very rudimentary, low-intensity movements, they go into the next day. So let's say they compete Monday or have a really hard practice Monday. Tuesday they have like a low-intensity day. Wednesday, they go into practice, and before they do anything, they report better feelings. So what these researchers are doing, these sports scientists are going and saying, how do you feel today on a scale of 1 to 10? I feel an 8. But the people that actually did high intensity every day were like, I'm feeling a 4 today. So that means for the coach, I want this to be a really good practice, so I'm going to give them an easy day in between 2 hard days. So you just have to ask yourself as a coach, you can agree with the research and trust that low-intensity sessions do work, or you can just ask for average practices every day. you know, or the output of practice is going to go good on Monday, slightly good on Tuesday, average on Wednesday, poor on Thursday. By Friday, you're mad, and you're going to run your athletes into the ground because they didn't do what you asked, which happens a lot. And the coach, they're just not buying into the program. They're lazy. They're not built like they used to be. No, they're built like they used to be. You're just crushing. And so, you know, that's the thing, is you've got to give them those low recovery days. And another thing too, outside of RPE, things that it allows you to do is build a fitness base while you're working on true speed. So if I'm wanting to go short to long in my speed development, and I'm starting with my 10-meter runs, and I eventually want to be over a 400, this low intensity training, this interval-based training, allows me to kind of bridge the gap between alactic and glycolytic or aerobic work. So it does that. It actually improves body composition and maintenance of your build. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that exist. I'm basically talking about the nervous system. Now, I'll talk about this tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that you have free reign on making them just go out and run, cycle, swim till exhaustion. It doesn't mean that it's metabolic, that you can do it to failure. Because there's this thing, like we say, interference phenomenon, which is there's two pathways to protein recovery and synthesis: mammalian transporter rapamycin or AMP kinase. Anytime I do strength and speed training, especially at the end of my program, I go mTOR, mammalian transporter rapamycin, I develop fast twitch characteristics. Anytime I add endurance training to that, or I train to failure, even if it's power speed and I train to failure, I go AMP kinase, which produces more mitochondria, which produces more slow twitch fibers, which makes me a slow athlete, which makes me second place.
Can you take a slow twitch athlete and turn him into a fast twitch athlete?
Yes. Yes. The whole thing that your slow twitch or fast twitch only is. Now there are things genetically that we can't change, but you'll see on your slides there's actually 7 types of fibers. We only teach 3, which makes people think that it's like, oh, you're stuck with what you got. Not really. I mean, you can actually change fiber completely to the point where anytime that we take someone in space flight, anytime that you have someone just sit on the couch for a long time, anytime that you see, like there's been research on this where a woman who is, like when she's pregnant and she's prescribed to stay in bed, oh my God, what's that term?
Bed rest?
Bed rest, thank you. Thank you, I'm overthinking things. They actually have a fiber shift. They actually go slow twitch to a lot of fast 2X. That's because anytime that you remove movement, you go fast twitch. Sometimes there's been some pretty interesting studies where they've taken mid-distance runners, who you would say is classically trained and very fit people to run the 800 to the mile, the 3K. They're trained, and they may even have some explosive training in their programming, but as someone who's a couch potato, a sedentary person, has a better vertical jump than the trained athlete. And that's because they are fast twitch, because they don't do anything to require aerobic metabolism. Crazy. So yeah, you can actually see fiber shifts in training, and that's the whole purpose of what we do, right? Is to take someone to their genetic potential, and not just say, well, you're stuck with what you got. Although, tomorrow, I'll talk about a topic that's probably, it's known to start debates and anger, and I like to bring it up just because it is what it is. Yeah.
So are these classes that when you go to the athlete who have a slow muscle can you teach them practice instead?
Yes. So I can tell you, there's not even like research evidence, but just anecdotal, like what we do in practice. You can take a distance athlete and you can add in jump training, strength training. You can actually improve the twitch characteristics of that distance athlete. And so why are American distance runners doing so much better now? It's, well, number one, we've learned that we have to put in an aerobic base. You know, we're running a lot of miles. But number two, we are also adding in more complex training to our, because it used to be if you were a distance athlete, we tried to do what everybody else did. What is the Kenyans doing? Okay, they're running a lot. We're just going to go run a lot and neglect everything else. Now we run a lot, plus we strength train, throw medicine balls, jump, which is allowing us to have better twitch characteristic. And so, yeah, you can definitely, that's the one thing I think most distance coaches do not do, is they don't add in strength training. You're welcome. All right. Now, I was just going to give you, these slides are more for you to take home and keep as a reference guide. It's not something that's new. It's just the way that things build into each other, and anytime you have questions, you can look back at this, it'll help. So when you talk about jump training or elastic strength development, the first thing you develop is myometric abilities. That's concentric. That means lengthening, or contracting. At first, again, the athlete, remember, enters into the training season, general prep. They're not at performance capabilities. So maybe you just focus on jumping out, maybe a med ball throw where you land on a mat. Maybe you jump, but instead of landing on your feet, where you have eccentric force and it damaging the muscle, maybe you just jump up and land on your butt. So like a standing long jump into the pit, but you land on a high jump mat. Make sense? Because guess what? I'm getting the jump out of it, but I'm not getting the fatigue from the landing. The landing's what beats me up, not the jump. So now I'm taking that out of it. So after I establish myometric jumping, then I want to establish isometric jumping. And that would be where you start with low-level depth lands. How do I land? This is something that, I would say any jumping sport or athlete should learn how to jump, land, and take off again. Most people land and they land on their heels, flat-footed. That's not how you, are you really going to take off again from that? No. If I get a rebound, am I going to come down like this? Probably not, because after I get the rebound, I got to do something with it. So then I got to transfer to my forefoot. So what I want to do is isometrically, I want to do a depth land from off the box, land, athletic stance, but forefoot, midfoot to forefoot. It's not on my toes, it's just right here where I'm able to go again. Okay, because I'm not trying to teach myself how to decelerate. I'm actually trying to teach myself how to go into another jump. Again, I'm complementing the future phase.
And avoiding any damage or any injury.
Yes, correct. And the last phase would be plyometric. And that's where people have kind of taken this term and said anything that where you're jumping or throwing is plyometric. Not really. It's a straight shortening cycle, myotic reflex into another jump. It's very advanced. Athletes should be strong to be able to do these things. It's consecutive jumping. And the athlete has to be able to tolerate it, and that's where the coach has to be able to watch and say, okay, if I'm doing 2 to 3 jumps in a row, and I see that the athlete can jump, and they don't break, okay, that's good, they can do one. What if I add another one in, and they go here? That's probably not good. They're not strong enough to tolerate the jump into that one. So maybe I say, okay, just do 1 jump at a time. And then when you get stronger, you can do 2 jumps at a time. So that's where the art of coaching comes in.
More or less, the nurses, often white, mostly during the rose sessions, and the results very under, like, extremely blood, this during days, like, two sessions, one was mostly not big sessions, and it's transmission sessions. But the training, mostly we do this for practicing like hearing or good hearing. Mostly we are providing how they can go to speed. I have to do the nerves for the speed and how to do the necessities, how to touch the wall and how we push the wall. More or less. So most of the swimmers, the nerve system is working. That's the most especially but the next day we can see from the training and see the normal.
next part is of this idea is speed development. Remember, I keep preaching this short to long. I guess this is kind of hard to see. So overall, you can see a theme is you go with one-phase acceleration. You improve acceleration, that means biomechanics, initial force production, momentum. That will allow you to go into what we call transitional speed. That would mean what happens when the body comes out of acceleration. Or you can sometimes call it, if you want to be nitpicky, acceleration endurance. Most people call it transition. So you're going from acceleration, perfecting that, acceleration into, again, transition, into velocity, top speed. Why would I work on that if my acceleration patterns are off? So make sure this is good before I go into here, and that will allow for competition speed to be at its highest level. Under this, I'm not going to take the time to speak on everything, but you can see ways to develop acceleration. So acceleration is built on propulsive forces, meaning I want my knee to be able to drive me forward, my center of gravity. We know for a fact that things that improve acceleration are incline sprinting. The good thing about sprinting up a hill is that the ground meets the foot. If I'm sprinting on the flat ground, I sprint, I drive, my foot has to come back to the ground. That means that I have more impact forces. Early on, I'm not strong enough to withstand those impact forces, so I bring the ground up to me. I bring the ground up to me, I have less impact forces, and again, I'm working on maturing my propulsive abilities. I can hold my positions better. I stay in acceleration phase longer. Maybe I'm a very weak athlete, and if I'm on the ground running on the track, I come up, my shin angles go vertical, my chest goes vertical at 16 meters. On the hill, I'm still accelerating at 30 meters if I want to. I can't get out of it. I can't escape acceleration patterns. So that's really good. Another thing, hold on a minute, is like sled pulls. Sled pulls do the same thing. If you don't have a hill, if you're on flat ground, pulling a sled, and it doesn't need to be something that breaks where you're having to go, it just needs to be good posture, concave back, where you're here. Most men, mature men, are like 20 to 25 kilograms. Females, 10 to 15 is enough to get a good position. What was your...
Can you stay for this?
Yes. Yes. They're perfect. I'll skip into velocity because I'll speak to the nervous system on this one. So velocity would be your race modeling, and that includes, does anybody know what race modeling is, or fly, float, fly, ins and outs? What's that one? Not agility. It's so a fly, float, fly, or an in and out is something that coaches do in athletics to work on top speed. So that means you run hard for 20 meters and then you float, so you actually relax, and then you hit it again. Does anybody know why we do it? Or do you just do it? We just do it. Speed and endurance? Maybe. Well, it works on speed, but does anybody know why we actually do it? Like, how does it improve speed?
Relaxing.
Recovery.
Recovery.
Are you talking about
Recovery.
Are you talking about based on
Yeah, so it's not like a fart. Like it's like if I'm a sprinter, I accelerate harder for 20 meters, and then it's bam, 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 and then I get to the next cone at 40 meters. So it's like
because that competition is.
It's so race modeling. It lets you run the distance of competition.
It's because you start that way and then you like from the 20 meters to the 80 meters probably you stand up like and then you accelerate again.
Yeah. Well, the reason why we do it is you want a last stab? Yeah.
It's related to the alactic, because we start with the alactic, then we use the lactic, speed endurance, and we save some ATP for them, and we do the alactic.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
It's like it's exploding from the start and pacing, and after that it's finishing. So more or less we are
Hard.
boom.
Yeah.
And that's that we are fine like the distance or speed after like 20 meters or 15 meters should be again it's going to energy what you actually do. So we can reach because the starts is the most important for athletes and what is more and more important is the finish.
Well,
For better
it does speak.
performance.
It does speak to that, like being able to like, but that's not the answer I'm going to give you. But it does allow for ATP resynthesis, possibly, if we give ourselves enough time. It does talk about kind of being able to, for the athlete to be able to feel what it's like to turn it on again for that speed play. Most importantly, it goes back to the fact that your nerve, your motor cortex, and your nervous system cannot continually send a maximal contraction and have the muscle actually recognize that signal and continue to fire at maximum abilities. So what we do is we do the speed play. So we do ins and outs, fly, float, fly. You know, hard, easy, hard. And what that does is that allows the motor cortex to send a really good signal. The muscle responds, bam, contract, contract, contract. But then if the motor cortex keeps sending that signal, guess what? Force doesn't change. So what you do is you back off, slows the signal down again, and then you do it again, and it's a recharge. So you actually improve velocity in that second phase, other than you would have compared to if you would have continued to try to sprint as fast as you can. So you actually improve velocities. Then, so those are like super maximal velocities, or like intra-run potentiation, that allow you to hit higher velocities when you actually compete as a sprinter. That is why when you do fly, float, fly, race modeling, or ins and outs, those are much more taxing to the athlete's nervous system than any other type of sprinting. Some would argue that ins and outs are more taxing sometimes than a competitive sprint.
Intervals?
You mean like intervals with a break? Or are you talking about like the...
Like you do one lap of rest.
Well, that's not the... This isn't kind of the same thing, because that allows you to... Like the break is to allow you to run like a race or a distance that you couldn't if you had it continuously. You know, like breaking up a 5K into 1K. But no, the idea behind this speed play is the fact that it allows your brain to talk to your muscles faster than they can if you compare to if you just continue to run as fast as you can. So you're actually having faster, what we call nerve conduction velocities, higher velocities from the brain. Electrical signal is faster by this speed play. So you can take that same thought process and put it into other sports. You know, if you're wanting, like I said, a fencing athlete to improve the ability to strike, if all it is you're wanting your athlete to be able to move faster through space with an implement, and I'm just wanting my athlete to move through space in general. Their body's there. So if I want their brain to be able to think faster, then maybe I want to do some speed play or something that mimics that in their daily practice, or not their daily practice, but sometime in there before competition. So the idea is you take these thoughts and then you make them work in your world. Now, this is block periodization written out with weight training exercises. And you'll see most of them are weightlifting exercises. Overhead presses would be done in strength endurance blocks.